I would say if you don't record yourself regularly as a bagpiper, that's a good indication you're not actually serious.
And for me, it wasn't until I was trying to like record tunes for other band members and stuff like that that I started actually putting a camera on my fingers and playing, and I was dismayed. But also, it's a good story because it drove me to improve when I watched recordings of my own fingers and thought I can't send this to so and so because that was terrible. And I would
Hmm.
never have realized what I needed to work on until I trained a camera on my own fingers and watched and listened to myself. So,
Right.
what's the value of recording oneself?
Yeah. So it's really kind of interesting. I don't know how where you are of the Dojo 11 Commandments of Mastery. Are you up to speed on that, Jim?
I've heard of the commandments. Let's put
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's kind of a funny story actually about recording because originally I had 10, right? I had 10 commandments
You're not the
that I had
first.
come
I
up
mean,
with.
that's a
Yeah. And the 10 commandments are like, yeah, exactly. Well, and then I had 10 things and it was like, oh, well, I'm going to call this the 10 commandments. And basically the idea, by the way, behind the commandments is not anything weird. It's just kind of like universal truths that seem to be true about everything that
yeah.
we need to make sure that we apply to our piping mastery, right?
It's not just
So,
further
and then
proof for all of our mothers that this whole dojo thing is actually a cult that we've joined.
right, exactly. Well, just in case you needed a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. But then, anyway, we had this. I had these 10, and I was working on writing them out, getting everything to make sense, getting my ideas clear on paper. But then I had like an epiphany, and I remember exactly where I was. I was at the gym, and speaking of borderline cults, I was at the
Yeah.
CrossFit gym, and I was writing my workout score on the board, and then it was like, oh crap, there's one more commandment that's sort of universally true, which is the idea that if you're serious about mastering any craft, not just bagpiping, if you're serious about mastering any craft, you need to record yourself on a fairly regular basis. And then just to sort of show my point, right? So if you're serious about I don't know, let's just use chess for starters because that's an easy one.
Yeah.
If you're serious about chess, right? Like that's one of the key indicators you've become serious is that you've learned that code that people use to record the moves, and then you record every move in every game that you've played so that you can analyze it after the fact. And keep that in mind, right? It's for analysis after the fact. That's the primary reason that you're going to record yourself. And then, you know, I'm sure we've all heard this call will be recorded for quality assurance purposes,
Yeah.
right? When we're stuck on hold. And I mean, that's exactly what that is. That's a business, or probably more specifically, a customer service department that needs to be able to analyze how things are going after the fact so that you can make adjustments.
I like that. A little thing going off in my head when I sit down to play. This practice session will be recorded for quality assurance.
Yeah, and there's there's little details there. I don't recommend recording your entire practice.
Yeah.
I recommend picking a small piece and recording it, and sort of setting that up strategically. But recording is super, 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 super important. And then I feel like it's more important on the bagpipes than a lot of other activities because the bagpipe has so many different moving pieces. The odds that you're going to have additional bandwidth to do careful analysis of what you're playing, the odds that that's going to happen during the performance are very, very low. I actually have a high level example of that. I remember I played at the silver medal at Oban in 2017, and I thought I had a great tune. And then Andrew Donlin played me or sent me the recording, and I listened to it. And then it was instantly like, oh, well, there, you better just go out to dinner and relax because it was not great. And I thought during the tune and afterwards, my recollection of what happened was like, oh, wow, that was really special. Who knows? Maybe
That's
I
a
can
rough
get
reality
a
check,
prize.
man.
Yeah, but then you get the reality check, and huge portions of the tune were good, but there was at least one very specific deal breaker in there, and it was like,
Did you
oh,
feel like in
well.
that case, like as you were playing, you were more focused on your fingers, and the recording made you realize what was going on with the drones, or some? something along those lines.
Well, it was more of a, that specific example was a tempo thing. So
Oh, gotcha.
I had let the tempo get way too fast in the Pibroch, and then beyond, maybe you could get away with a little bit of exciting tempo, but that amount of exciting tempo really kind of was a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But I digress. But the recording, that's a high example, or a higher level example of like, oh, we thought we were good, but not really. And there's been a lot of cases of that, even at the higher levels. But I guess my point is, even at the higher levels, you don't really have the bandwidth to do real analysis during the performance.
Yeah.
Like you should be out there doing your personal best, but then you need a recording to go back to, so that you can listen to things. I highly recommend that. It gets a little weird. Bagpipe world is a little bit weird, but you should absolutely be attempting to record your solo competitions as well, so that you can compare and contrast what the judges said with the actual recording. Something I highly recommend.
That's such a good point. How many of us have looked at a judging sheet and either been like, what are they even talking about? Or thought to ourselves, well, they're obviously wrong about that. I did that great.
Those
Maybe
guys are
having a
jerks.
recording will help us to be
Those judges are such jerks. What does Terry Lee know? Oh my God,
what does
he's
Terry
so
Lee
annoying.
know?
He's never liked me. That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a
They're
great
out to
one we
get
all
me.
go to,
Yeah.
right? Oh, that judge has never liked me.
Yeah.
This is just bull crap. But then if you have a recording and then you compare it to the sheet, it would take me many, many sets of fingers to count the number of times that I actually listened to the recording, compared it to what the judges said, and then I had to admit, oh, wait, I
Yeah.
totally understand, and they're completely right. And
Yeah.
okay, a little ego check there, and then and then you got to go for it. But so anyway, the basic philosophy behind recording is that it's super important. I would say if you don't record, here's one. I would say if you don't record yourself regularly as a bagpiper, that's a good indication you're not actually serious.
And
See
everybody's
what I did there? I just said something controversial there to try and get some clicks.
Yeah, I heard them.
Yeah.
I heard the wave of clicks rushing up.
I know. But yeah, you should put that at the start of the episode.
Yeah, that'd be
And
a good
then
one.
see what happens. We'll either see a sharp drop off in viewership or but
Or a
anyway,
bunch
that's
of, "Wait,
outrage.
what?"
That's outrage sells.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, if you don't record yourself regularly, you're not actually serious. What's regularly?
Yeah,
you
is
could
that
start-
every practice session? Like, what does that mean exactly?
I would start with once a week. I would start with once a week, maybe on a Thursday or something. Make a point of recording something and sending it to someone that you respect.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll learn about how good you actually are once you start holding yourself to that practice.
You want to do trick your friend into a double blind study kind of thing, and just send them the recording and don't tell them it's you, right? And just be like,
Right.
hey, what do you think of this piper? Then you can get some really
Yeah, you could try that.
feedback.
Yeah, it's tough to trick people, but you could try it.
Yeah.
But you'll learn a lot about how good you are, putting yourself through some sort of recording regimen. And then when you get quite serious, I would bump those recordings up to basically every time that you're practicing.
Yeah.
Grab a small chunk of something every time you practice would be that's what we should work towards. And then when I'm doing real practice and real prep for something specific, that recorder plays a big role. When I'm getting ready for Inverary in the late spring, the recorder comes out, making sure things are sounding good, and that what I'm actually hearing is representative of reality.
A lot of the value that we've talked to so far with recording could be described as negative value, not negative, but in order to catch your mistakes and improve upon them. But it occurs to me that one of the great benefits of recording too would be if you have a recording from 3 weeks ago and then a recording from this week, you might, if you weren't tracking that progress, you might be improving and not noticing it, and therefore get discouraged. But if you can review the record and see, no, I am making progress, then that can be a
Yes.
really encouraging thing.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not my intention for it to be a negative exercise.
Yeah,
It should be a really, I always see the silver lining. I always gravitate towards the things I did really well. And then I'll find some things that didn't go so well, and that just kind of goes on my list. Like, okay, that's what I can tweak for next time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it shouldn't be really negative, particularly at all. Sometimes it can be, especially when you first start recording yourself, because until that point, you're probably in quite a bit of denial about how things are going, how things are sounding. And that's just the way that it is. Do you ever find when you hear a recording of your own voice that you don't like how it sounds?
Never like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you never like it, right? And that's your own voice. That's something that you exercise constantly all day long. And then you listen to it played back and you're like, oh man, I sound like, I sound like a real dork.
It's never something nice like, oh, great, I sound like Barry White or something, right? It's never,
Right, exactly. Or better than, or whatever. And that's something I've had to get over. That's something I've had to get over as as my livelihood is broadcasting myself on the internet.
Right.
But I still kind of don't love it, but over time, it's the same idea. It's like you listen to a class that you've taught and you're like, okay, well, I've got to change how I do this, this, and this. Maybe overall it's not too bad, but then you start to get into your flow and kind of figure out how you want to do things. Cool. You want to talk gear?
Yeah. In part because like we're all in this situation where we have a lot of, we have maybe more recordings than we used to of ourselves playing with online contests and stuff like that. So whether it's for practice or an in-person contest or an online contest, can I just pull my phone out and get a recording? Is that good enough? What if I want to take it to the next level? How do I do that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of things, a lot of little things to think about here. First one is, if you're playing the practice chanter, don't rule out recording your practice chanter work. Okay. For starters, if you're recording your practice chanter, any smartphone built in the last 10 years is the perfect tool, and you should look no further. For really good quality recordings of your practice chanter. Every phone that I know of has some sort of voice memo app where you can just quickly record something and send something off. Even built into the Facebook Messenger now, they have one. We use those in Inverary all the time. Like Allie Henderson will say, right, lads, we've got to clean this section up. Let's start with, hearing you play whatever passage it is at this tempo with the metronome, and then people will just kind of send in their homework, so to speak. And it's kind of a neat thing. And as long as it's just on practice chanter, the logistics could not be simpler.
Yeah.
Okay. Now with the bagpipes, it's a different story because the bagpipes are very loud and they have a really rich harmonic spectrum. So between those two things, it's fair to say that very few devices in the world are designed to be able to record that kind of thing well. So the practice chanter, which by the way, that's the reason pipers use practice chanters, is that they're quieter. They're more like voice volume. And so, they work really well with typical recording devices, but the bagpipes do not. And I'm sure everyone's tried that. You've put your phone up there and then you've played your bagpipes, and the resulting sound is very kind of brash and distorted and scratchy sounding. Like Jim, I'm sure you've experienced that, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And also, once the chanter starts, the drones essentially disappear. Who knows what's going on back there?
Yeah. And then, and that's because the typical iPhone or smartphone or even laptop microphone, first of all, it's really only designed for voice. And then the software around that is really designed to accommodate the voice. Okay. But then it's not designed for a broader range of harmonics, and it's definitely not designed for that amplitude, aka kind of like volume. It's not designed for that volume that the bagpipes are going to throw at that. So, it applies and it actually, anyone who hangs out on Zoom, you'll know this, right? It actually kind of like sees that as like this weird background noise and then starts to try to cancel it out. Right. And it's just like this huge hot mess, right? And so recording bagpipes can be a huge hot mess. And so we need to figure out some kind of solution to be able to deal with that. And then Jim, I see you've got your Zoom recorder right there in the shop.
Right here. Yes, sir.
Like that's a great tool. And because the Zoom is designed with some flexible recording options built into it to allow you to record a lot of different types of things successfully. And the key ingredient that one has, besides being a nice microphone that's designed to pick up all sorts of frequencies, instead of like a cheap, $10 microphone that they try to sneak into the build of your laptop, so they don't have to, they don't have to increase their cost of making the laptop too much, right? Like that's what, and then same with the iPhones. Although the microphones in the iPhones are way better now, but it used to be really tough. But anyway, the Zoom is designed to be a good microphone, but then it also has a key ingredient for recording bagpipes, which is the, what we would call it, the gain adjustment.
Yeah.
Okay, so
instead
of auto gain, so most devices use something you would call auto gain adjust.
Yeah.
Okay, gain, you could think of gain as just the amount of sound that the microphone is letting in, right? And then most things have what's called auto gain adjust, which means that the software is going to try to sense how loud the thing is that's coming in, and then it'll adjust the gain automatically, which for the bagpipes really doesn't work well.
Yeah.
And then the reason for that is that the low G and the high A and all the different notes in between, they actually have different volume levels, don't they? Like
way
the low G,
in a lot of cases.
yeah, like considerably different. And so every time you play a different note, the software is doing its crazy like auto gain adjust, like probably at the speed of light, and then it gives it that really wonky, brash, not solid sound.
Yeah.
So we want a device that kind of gets rid of the auto gain adjust, where you can set the gain, okay? And then you're going to set the gain. I don't know if it's low or high, but I think it's low.
Yeah.
You want to set the gain low so that the bagpipe doesn't distort. And then also, it's not going to attempt to adjust the gain every time it hears something louder or softer. It's just going to go with that level. And then the result can be really quite nice. And the Zoom recorder is quite nice. And then I have this guy here. It's always nearby. When I travel, I throw it in my pipe case. This is an iPhone attachment for my
it just
iPhone.
plugs into your phone, yeah. Oh, and you got your gain
and
wheel
then
right on it.
And then it's got the classic. This is made by Zoom. It's the same company that makes that mic.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you can adjust the gain right here depending on what you want. And that lets you just attach it to your iPhone. And you can get, because iPhone cameras are, of course, amazing, right?
Yeah.
So you can get video and high quality audio all combined really, really easily. That's my sort of go-to attachment. And this is what we would recommend for everybody at Dojo U too. It's just simple. It's $99. Can't beat it.
Right.
And you plug it in there. And then like, if you just listen, by the way, I have this recording that this is like an example of me playing a little bit of P-Rock with that microphone that you see.
Oh, that was that one right there.
Ooh, screwed up that movement there. I don't know how clearly people can hear that, but
Well, that's one thing to note. Based on how they're streaming it, the quality might be here or there. But the thing that's going to be obvious is that we could hear all the notes, that high G, as well as the low notes too, the low A and the low G, and we could hear the drones. We could hear everything. And that's what you want, right? You want to be able to hear everything.
Exactly. Like that. So it's a quality of recording that I really can't distinguish that quality of recording, maybe the quality of the playing. Okay. But I can't distinguish the quality of the recording from any top-notch recordings I've heard. It just sounds really nice. And then, could Murray Blair or some like extreme sound producers improve upon that? Of course. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure.
But that's it. Like that's what the bagpipe sounds like. From outside, and there's no distractions in there, and I can hear very clearly all the detail I could possibly want to hear, and that would be great. That would, and that even just this little attachment, if you set the gain properly, it would work really well for recording your pipe band. Would work really well for recording quiet things, loud things, whatever. And then that Zoom thing that you have is great as well, Jim. And then you can go with other stuff. The final thing I would say about that is. When you record yourself, you want to find a singular microphone like this. This is actually two. It gives you a sort of stereo feed, which is fine, but it's going to sit in a singular point in your practice space. Okay. Like sometimes I've seen people spend like hundreds of dollars on like an array of microphones,
Yeah.
and they have them placed all over their practice room, I really, really don't recommend that.
Interesting.
It's totally not what you're going to get is not as good as what I just played you.
Because see,
from
my,
there, unless you're
my
a
thought
real
would have been
professional.
more is better, you know. So why not?
Yeah, more is not better. As a matter of fact, what you want to do is you want to find a microphone just like this one. And then I think of this as an audience member, right? Here it is. It's like just kind of like me. It's like I'm like an audience member, and then I place my microphone in a where would I want to sit if I were listening to myself right now,
Oh yeah, great idea.
right? Right, and that's sort of my litmus test, and that's where I place my microphone. So, especially considering that a piper tends to move around in the space, right?
Yeah.
The right place you want to sit is probably 10, 12 feet away from the player, okay? At just about, waist height, maybe even a little bit higher. And that's where you want to put the microphone. A lot of people have the right gear, let's say, but then they place the microphone like right underneath their chanter.
Yeah, just right there on the tabletop. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get a really weird quality of sound that's all chanter in your face. And you're not hearing the right balance between the chanter and the drones. And you're certainly not hearing what you're intending to put out there when you play, if your microphone is placed that close. And by the way, you also don't want to place it 100 feet away,
Yeah.
right? Because you wouldn't want to be an audience member 100 feet away from a player either, especially indoors. Because then you would get way too much echo all over the walls and you wouldn't be able to hear the details. So you just want to think about, like, if I were the judge, where would I be sitting right now?
Yeah.
Or if I were listening to myself, where would I get the best experience? And that's where you should place the microphone.
Now I'm thinking,
and
next time I set up a microphone, I'm going to put it on a folding chair and lay a clipboard in front of it just to mimic the sonic adjustments that a clipboard might make for a judge as they're listening.
Yeah.
Right?
But you're being goofy, but that's a great point, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to improve the quality of your recording, before you think about changing gear, on the assumption that you have a nice microphone like this one or the one you've got there, Jim, is good. But before you think about changing gear, think about changing where you're playing, right? If you're playing in a room, like if you're playing in a square closet, with like really angular walls and like, there's no carpet or anything, and it's just all ringing like crazy, that's probably the issue with how you're sounding, and it's not the equipment. So find a place where you really love the sound and record there. In my office, especially over the years, I've got like a little carpet in there now, and just there's more here in the space. I really like how pipes sound in here. It can get a little bit echoey, right? So I have to be careful not to place my microphone too far away. And I have to kind of I've got sort of my sweet spot that I like. But then I'm able to get a really nice quality of sound. And that's it. You just put the microphone there. There's special effects you can put on recordings, like reverb. I love reverb.
Oh, you're a reverb guy, because I feel like that's the camp that often separates people, like whether it's penny whistles or bagpipes or anything. It's like, are you a reverb guy or a non-reverb guy?
Yeah, so I love reverb, okay? But when I'm recording my own bagpipe playing,
Yeah.
I would never put effects on it, right? I just want to hear what the microphone gets in
Plain
the
vanilla.
space.
Yeah.
Yep, vanilla. And certainly for practical purposes, that's what you want. And then if you're going to release an album, right, that's where it would be good to go into a studio or to really pick the perfect performance location and then let a sound engineer, do common sense things to make it sound the best it can sound. But for actual analysis of your playing, we don't need any special effects or anything.
Mm-hmm. They could get in the way even.
Yeah, well, and it would give you a false representation of what's really going on.
Yeah.
Which is probably why most people like reverb.
Yeah, it kind of hides
the special effect. Yeah, because it hides some of the
echo.
details
Yeah.
and adds some texture. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a vinyl fence put in my backyard 2 summers ago, and very unexpectedly found my very favorite spot to play bagpipes now. And it's interesting that standing in this spot, it's like 20 feet away from the vinyl fence, but with a tree next to it and stuff. When I stand there, it doesn't sound special, but recordings from a little ways away from that spot, it's a special spot, man. It sounds so good, and there's something about that vinyl fence bouncing the sound back.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's very surprising how, if you think about it, how much of the sound that you produce is created by the room that you're in. Like,
Yeah.
for example, my voice right here, there's a little bit of decay, right? And that's basically a nerd word for echo. But there's a little bit of echo going on. And it just gives my voice a little bit of presence and a little bit of additional texture that I would not get if I was in like a carpeted room.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes worth thinking about. It's definitely worth thinking about. And by the way, pipe bands sound so warm and nice on a nice patch of grass,
Yeah.
right? Which is why it's such a great venue for competition. And it's also why I'm hesitant to just immediately agree when people say stuff like, oh, the world has to be moved indoors because of the rain and all. It's like, yeah, but no, because it's not going to sound nearly as good indoors as it does outdoors.
I feel like it should have been obvious, but it's so interesting. Like I never would have thought of it. I've done like mini band competitions in like school gyms and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
of course that's going to sound way different than out on the green.
Gross.
Yeah,
A
it
gym is a
definitely
really
not as
gross
pleasant.
place.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah,
grass
it's like
sounds
you're
better
just
for
playing.
sure.
It's like the floor echoes like crazy, the ceiling echoes like crazy, all the walls echo like crazy.
Yep.
And then there's like bleachers. Have you ever been to we went to Chichen Itza pyramids
Oh, awesome.
on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
And one of like the goofy tourist trap features is like, if you go up near it and clap your hands, you hear like this weird ring off the steps.
Yep, totally.
But like a gym's got those Chichen Itza steps too
Right,
in
that's
it,
right,
doesn't
yeah.
it? It's just a total nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty bad. Anyway, there you go. A fairly in-depth discussion about recording there.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Things to think about.